Welcome to Interesting History for YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and comment below for more interesting history. Sundown town history is a dark and often overlooked chapter in American history. These towns, also known as sunset towns, were communities where African Americans and other minority groups were not welcome after dark. The concept of sundown towns dates back to the late 19th century and persisted well into the 20th century. In this video, we will delve into the history of sundown towns in America, exploring their origins, enforcement methods, impact on minorities, legal battles, and the lasting legacy they have left on modern society. Unpacking the definition, what were sundown towns? Imagine stepping into a town where, as the sun dips below the horizon, you know you must leave simply because of the color of your skin. This was the reality in sundown towns, unique municipalities with unwritten rules or explicit policies prohibiting people of color from staying after dark. The name Sundown Town itself paints a vivid picture. These were places where, by sundown, anyone who wasn't white was expected to be gone, often under threat of harm or harassment. Sundown towns weren't a southern phenomenon alone. They dotted the American landscape from coast to coast, encompassing communities in the North, Midwest, and even the West. While the primary targets were African Americans, the exclusion didn't stop there. These towns also barred Hispanic, Asian, Native American, and Jewish individuals, showcasing a broader scope of discrimination that extended beyond race to touch on ethnicity and religion. The enforcement of these policies could be overt, with menacing signs posted at town limits, or it could operate through more insidious means: economic pressure, social exclusion, or the sheer threat of violence. The objective was clear: maintain racial purity by ensuring minorities did not feel welcome or safe after daylight hours. Understanding what sundown towns were helps us grasp the extent of institutional racism that pervaded America, not just in the segregated South, but across the entire nation. It's a testament to the lengths communities went to preserve homogeneity, and a stark reminder of the challenges minority groups have faced throughout American history. A timeline of tolerance and terror, the historical emergence of sundown towns. As America turned the page from the Civil War and ventured into the Reconstruction era, the landscape of racial dynamics began to shift. This period marked the genesis of sundown towns, a grim testament to the resilience of racial prejudice in the fabric of the nation. Initially, these exclusionary communities sprang up in the late 19th century, an era that should have heralded greater freedoms and rights for African Americans. Instead, it witnessed the birth of towns determined to maintain racial purity by keeping minorities, especially African Americans, at bay after sundown. The proliferation of sundown towns wasn't just a spontaneous occurrence. It was a calculated response to the increasing rights of African Americans and the migration patterns that saw minorities moving into new regions seeking better opportunities. As the 20th century unfolded, the number of sundown towns grew, particularly during the early to mid-20th century, reflecting broader societal tensions and the entrenchment of segregationist attitudes. The peak of this phenomenon was observed in the 1950s and 1960s, a period that, ironically, was also a time of burgeoning civil rights activism. These towns weren't confined to the traditionally segregated South. Instead, they were a nationwide issue, with communities in the North, Midwest, and West adopting policies or social practices to exclude minorities after dark. This widespread acceptance and implementation of exclusionary practices highlight the pervasive nature of racism across America, challenging the notion that intolerance was solely a Southern issue. Sundown towns became a stark symbol of the systemic efforts to preserve white supremacy and exclude people of color from public and social life. deeply impacting the social and demographic fabric of the nation. Signs, signals, and subtlety. How sundown towns were enforced. The methods by which sundown towns maintained their exclusionary status were as varied as they were pervasive. On one hand, some towns made their stance glaringly obvious by mounting signs at their peripheries, stark warnings that people of colour were to depart by nightfall. These signs served as unmissable signals, setting the tone for the unwelcome environment minorities would face. However, not all tactics were as overt. Many towns opted for a more covert approach to ensure the continuity of their discriminatory practices. It wasn't uncommon for local businesses to join in the exclusion by refusing service or employment to minorities, effectively making it impossible for these individuals to sustain a livelihood within town limits. Social ostracism also played a crucial role. A network of silent agreements among town residents ensured that minorities would find no comfort or community after dark. In instances where these silent understandings weren't enough to deter the presence of minorities, the enforcement methods could escalate to outright intimidation or violence. The mere threat of physical harm was sometimes sufficient to enforce the unwritten rule, but sadly, instances of violence against those who defied or inadvertently breached the Sundown Ordinance were not rare. Through these varied means, be they glaring signs, economic and social exclusion, or the threat of violence, sundown towns were able to perpetuate an atmosphere of intolerance and fear. These enforcement strategies underscored the systemic nature of racial discrimination, embedding it deeply within the fabric of these communities. Beyond black and white, sundown towns and other minorities. While the narrative of sundown towns often centers around the African American experience, it's crucial to recognize that the shadow of exclusion cast a much wider net. These policies also profoundly impacted Hispanic, Asian, Native American, and Jewish communities, illustrating a multifaceted dimension of discrimination that extended its reach beyond the boundaries of race alone. The experiences of these other minority groups in sundown towns bring to light the complex tapestry of prejudice that wove itself into the fabric of American society. Hispanic communities, for example, encountered barriers not only in the form of racial discrimination but also cultural and linguistic exclusion, making it challenging for them to find a foothold in towns governed by these unwelcoming principles. Similarly, Asian Americans, whether they were of Chinese, Japanese, or Filipino descent, faced a dual threat of racism and xenophobia, further isolating them from the promise of equal opportunity. Native Americans, who had already endured centuries of displacement and marginalization, found sundown towns to be another layer of systemic oppression, denying them access to resources and safe havens within their own country. The Jewish population, too, was not immune to the reaches of sundown town policies. Anti-Semitism, coupled with racial prejudices, created environments where Jewish individuals and families were ostracized, threatening their safety and economic stability. The acknowledgement of these varied experiences is essential in understanding the full scope of sundown towns' impact. It wasn't just an African American issue, it was an American issue, reflecting deep-seated biases that transcended color lines and affected a broad spectrum of minority communities. This broader perspective helps us appreciate the intricate ways in which discrimination manifested and reminds us of the collective journey towards equality and justice. Legal framework and civil rights, the battle against sundown towns. The fight to dismantle sundown towns gained significant momentum alongside the civil rights movement, marking a pivotal era in American history. As activists and communities rallied for change, the legal system began to play a crucial role in challenging and ultimately overturning the policies that supported these exclusionary practices. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, a cornerstone in this battle, prohibited discrimination in public places, offering a powerful tool against the institutionalized segregation of sundown towns. This groundbreaking legislation, coupled with subsequent civil rights laws, paved the way for integrating communities and ensuring equal rights under the law. Further efforts, including lawsuits and legal challenges, targeted the more insidious aspects of sundown town policies, such as housing discrimination and unequal employment practices. These actions not only spotlighted the injustices, but also forced many towns to confront and change their discriminatory practices. The legal battles of this era underscored the importance of the judiciary in the fight against racial exclusion and set precedents that continue to influence civil rights advocacy today. This legal framework did more than just dismantle the physical and policy barriers of sundown towns. It marked a transformative step toward equality, emphasizing the role of law in shaping a more inclusive America. By challenging the status quo and advocating for justice, the legal victories against sundown towns helped redefine the nation's commitment to civil rights and equality for all its citizens. The legacy lives on: sundown towns in modern America. In today's society, the shadows of sundown towns stretch further than the fading light at dusk. While overt policies may have vanished, their legacy subtly infiltrates aspects of contemporary life, manifesting in less visible but equally impactful ways. Echoes of these towns' exclusionary practices resonate in the ongoing issues of residential segregation and the stark inequalities in access to quality education, healthcare, and economic opportunities that disproportionately affect minority communities. Efforts to combat these lingering effects are vital as they continue to inform discussions on racial equality and social justice. By recognizing and addressing the remnants of sundown town policies, we can work toward dismantling the systemic barriers that still persist, ensuring a more inclusive future for all Americans. This recognition is not just about acknowledging a bygone era, but actively engaging in the continuous struggle to rectify the injustices that remain embedded within the fabric of our society. Unearthing the past: efforts to document sundown town history. The quest to bring the history of sundown towns into the light of public awareness is gaining momentum, driven by a dedicated community of historians, researchers, and activists. These individuals are on a mission to ensure that the stories and experiences of those who lived through the era of sundown towns are not only remembered, but also serve as educational tools for current and future generations. Through meticulous research and the collection of oral histories, they are piecing together the puzzle of America's past, marked by exclusion and discrimination. Documentaries and books are emerging as powerful mediums in this effort, offering insight into the lived experiences of individuals and communities affected by sundown town policies. These resources are crucial in painting a comprehensive picture of how these policies shaped the social and demographic landscape of countless American towns. Oral histories, in particular, provide a personal touch to the narrative, allowing us to hear directly from those who navigated the challenges of living in or near sundown towns. This burgeoning field of research not only illuminates the past, but also encourages a dialogue on how the legacies of these towns continue to impact society today. By uncovering these hidden chapters of American history, the efforts to document sundown town history contribute to a broader understanding of the nation's journey through racial discrimination and towards inclusivity. It's a reminder that, while the sun may have set on sundown towns, the work to reconcile with this aspect of our history is ongoing and vital. The impact of sundown towns on contemporary society. The ripple effects of sundown towns continue to reverberate in today's world, subtly influencing the social and cultural fabric of our nation. These towns, with their exclusionary practices, laid a foundation for patterns of residential segregation that persist, affecting the distribution of wealth, education, and access to resources. Recognizing this history helps us understand the roots of systemic inequalities and challenges us to address these ongoing issues with determination and empathy. It's essential to reflect on how these practices have shaped attitudes and policies towards race and inclusion in contemporary America. By fostering an environment of awareness and dialogue, we can work together to create communities that celebrate diversity and promote equality. Our journey towards healing and unity is ongoing, and acknowledging the impact of sundown towns is a critical step in paving the way for a more just and inclusive society. Together, we can build a future where everyone feels safe and valued, regardless of the time of day.